Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, everybody. This is the morning show brought to you by Helpful for Life. I'm Reed Garcia.
This is the guy drinking coffee, Richards.
Hi, Drinking Coffee Richards. Nice to have you. And today, I actually get to say we are filmed in front of a live audience. And there's a tractor driving by.
No pressure.
Well, Ryder, today we're going to talk about getting older. Maybe among a couple of other things, but we have a special someone here who happened to be turning 80 years old today.
I didn't catch almost any of that, Reed. There's a lot of attenuation on the signal.
Okay. Well, let's see if that gets a little better. If not, I guess we'll just figure it out. All right, let's try that again, Ryder. I said
Yeah,
today we
we
are.
could just both take turns talking about
Yeah.
whatever we want.
Oh, also very true. Also very true. But today we have a lovely guest here with us, Danielle's grandmother. She is turning 80 years old, and she's also joined by another old geezer who turned 80 a few weeks ago. And yesterday, as part of our vacation, we went to a German restaurant, and we had a great time. And I was curious, Ryder, what is the oldest person that you regularly engage with?
Oh, man, probably you, Reed.
Yeah, that's good. Real right, real right.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Probably people in their mid 50s is about as high as I've been engaging with lately.
Well, there was so a few weeks ago, I went to Colorado and I was at UC Boulder, and they had on the side of their building, it was a quote etched in stone, and it was something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, but the man who only knows his generation has not lived.
Yeah, good trying to get to know the younger generation, but I think the older generation could teach me a whole lot more.
Yeah, and you joke, but I do think going younger and older is important because there's plenty that the youth could teach at both of us, right? I'm sure there's plenty, if
Oh
nothing
yeah.
else, plenty of internet memes that we could learn about, huh?
Yeah, no, I've got grandparents that well, I've got a grandmother that's still left that I haven't been around to see in a while, and I need to go do that, make some time for that. But it is fascinating every time I hang out with her. Some little bit of wisdom or some story comes out that's I don't know, puts a lot of things in perspective, especially because they ended up living through the tail end of the Depression. So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that the depression because that was one of the things that my mother-in-law put out here today was things going on in 1941, and it's easy to forget just how long ago that was. And I joke with you all the time about how old you are, but you're barely even halfway there.
Yeah, I still have a depression to look forward to. Hooray.
That's a good way to put it. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about getting older was the importance of engaging with people from different generations, and especially the older generations. And I'll start off with a question. I was curious about you or your wife and any observance you guys had when y'all were in Japan and how they treated the elderly people there. Bad
Ooh, I
connection on this
lost
one
those in
again.
there, Reed.
Hold on just 1 second. All right, Ryder. Let's see if we made one minor tweak. Let's see if that changes the internet a little bit. I was asking if you have heard any, or sorry, not if you've heard, but whenever your wife lived in Japan and when you went and visited, if there were any big, anything you guys noticed about how they treated the elderly people there.
Oh man, they are a much more respectful culture when it comes to age and when it comes to society in general, and treating different people with sort of deference, or everybody with deference on a certain level. Like it's a very polite society. But yes, the older people were still cherished. Their wisdom was still cherished. And I'm not sure if that's across the board, but in the communities that we were in, there was a lot of discussion about that as well. When we're talking about the 1940s, then Japan was, of course, bombed by us at the end of World War II. And so that's a culture that went through some real hardship and has worked hard to sort of overcome the sort of, I think, depressional stigma that I think they felt they were going into after that loss in World War II. And so those
Yeah,
older people are a gateway to that time.
yeah, and that's one of those interesting things to see is how those major events affect how people think and what people do and how they treat each other, right? And so that's one of the things, you know, that some people will talk about with this generation, right? We've had COVID now, which is one of the big significant things that has happened, and that affects the way people look at illness and vaccinations and things like that. Whereas people who came back from World War I or World War II, like they that not only were the people there severely affected, but everyone around them, right, was affected as well. And especially with World War II, for example, because that was really a worldwide, or at least in the nations involved, everyone was involved, right? They had the victory gardens back at home, and they had this idea of doing more for the other, right, and doing more for the larger community, rather than just caring about themselves and things like that, right? And clearly here in America, we've moved a little bit away from that, huh?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It definitely feels like we have. We are in what I would kind of term a hyper individualistic age, where people are often so concerned with themselves that community is a very distant idea. Sometimes friends and family might show up, but outside of that, there's not a lot of bonding with community. However, people do still love doing things like putting a Texas flag on their truck, right? So there are still teams and tribes, and if you want to consider that community, you can. But I don't know. There's something about sacrificing for others and sharing time and energy with others that I think is really vital to a way a community operates. And I do remember that whenever I was younger, then our church would have a lot of activities that were based around these just communal giving as a way to just sort of teach people this is what you do as a good person. You go out and you engage with the community and you help.
Yeah, that's really cool. And speaking of community, makes me think again of neighbors, like we talked about 2 weeks ago today on the first. And uh, I can't remember if we mentioned it on that episode or not, but one of our neighbors at our apartment complex is an 86-year-old woman, and she is one of the nicest people that we've ever met. We were moving in, and on the day that we were moving in, she came over and she said, "I'm on my way to Walmart. To pick up my prescriptions?" And I was wondering, can I get you guys anything? I'm like, "Lady, you're the 86-year-old woman. I'm supposed to be offering those types of things to you."
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. That is so great. They're just so thoughtful and, accommodating and kind and, and all these things. It's really kind of fun to bump into that. We had a retired Baptist minister and his wife living next to us for a few years, and he had a garden and he was just so generous. Grow things, did all this work, was always asking us about our day. I mean, it was sort of strange, but not having that for so long, I think my wife and I didn't even know how to handle it. We didn't even know what to do. I mean, we could be nice in return, but it wasn't our default setting to go out of our way to ask them for what they needed.
Yeah, oh, and that's the thing, and that's, I think, part of, obviously. it varies from person to person, right? And partially about where they are and things like that. And that's one of the things that I'm really glad to have both of my parents from Mississippi, because that Southern hospitality is deeply steeped within me. From early on, the things like respect and caring for people, asking what they need. And of course, there's some negative Southern hospitality traits as well, but I tried my best to minimize those.
Like what?
uh, you know, I don't know. No comment on that one. But
Yeah.
one of the things that um, I wanted to point out was to jump back to where you're from and how you're treating elderly people. So we referenced Japan, which has been touted as one of the better examples of uh, how they treat elderly and how they're very incorporated into society, and it's very common for the parents to be living with their kids as they age and things like that. Versus the very stark contrast here in America, where it's more likely to, oh, you go over here and do your thing, and we'll send you into a home or whatnot, and then we'll
Yeah.
touch you with a 10-foot pole. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean it's my grandparents on my father's side and now my mother's side as well ended up at different points in retirement living. And, the funny thing is they talk about it as being super swanky and so nice and this, that, and the other. And they have a community within there and all these things. And they talk about it like it's really great. And maybe it is. I don't know. I think that it becomes better, but there's something as well about like we value you, so we're going to spend our money on you. But then to continue to show up weekly or monthly to actually make visits and make time for these people is kind of a more difficult thing in our society. It's something maybe we don't do very well. And I think there's a whole lot of sort of premises that exist that, well, we will put them in this home so that there's doctors close by and nurses close by, and it's all under safety and care because we're too busy living our own lives to actually give that ourselves. And that's kind of a prioritization issue there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you mentioned, people being too busy, right? We've talked about that a few times about how that is in America, a very common mindset. It's a cultural thing. And before we go any further, I wanted to make sure to ask you, because yesterday we were talking about vacations and we had those challenges, and we said two kind of challenges. One was, what is some way that you can incorporate something about that vacation or relaxation mindset into your weekly day. We talked about the work day and how they claim the whole day even though they don't need to. And then we also talked. I don't remember exactly the second challenge. Do you remember offhand? It was something about more about a standard vacation.
Oh, I don't remember the standard vacation one. I do remember that I kinda kept pushing to take a vacation from your phone, a micro vacation, and that sort of tied into our earlier conversations about phones and technology and surveillance and habits and all that kinda good stuff. But yeah, yesterday we actually had our neighbors over. So we had 3 neighbors over, from 2 houses, and they hung out on the back porch, and we got dinner for them, and we just sat around and talked and ate and drank, and yeah, it was really quite lovely.
Well, that's nice. So I've got to ask: was that already going on, or coincidentally, or was that an
No,
intentional effort?
that was an actual intentional effort. And I know it's really strange, but it was kinda like one neighbor came over, and then I was like, "Oh, this is that thing. This is that moment." And so we called the other neighbors and saw if they wanted to come over, and then, Sue Ann went out and got some, I don't that, new place that opened, the Mad for Chicken place down here, so it was the
Oh,
Korean
okay,
style chicken,
nice.
and, yeah, it ended up being great, and we just sort of sat around in the backyard until, I don't know, 9:30 or something, just shooting the breeze, and, yeah, it was really lovely, but it was, what, a Thursday, and it made that Thursday feel like it was a Friday, or
Yeah,
something, or maybe a Saturday.
yeah, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that. And not only was it making true on that challenge, but you're engaging with your neighbors too and building a little bit of local community as well. So that's great. And one of the things that I've heard more and more is that it's important to celebrate. And so since we have a live audience today, we're going to give you a lovely round of applause.
No, thank you.
Well done, Ryder. So back to getting older. What are your thoughts on getting older? Is that something that is fear brings a bunch of fear to you? Do you feel like you're one step closer to dying? Do you wonder if that hair can get any grayer? Or is it a positive thing for you?
Um, I don't really think of it as positive or negative. It's just something that's happening, you know. And I don't. I've been told before that because I'm a guy, then guys seem to age gracefully, and we don't have to worry about anything or do anything. And so there's this kind of I don't know, stereotype of that aging is hard on women due to the way our society sort of builds and shapes women, but it's easy on men. And I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but it is a stereotype that was brought up to me, I think just 2 days ago. Somebody was talking about this with me. And I've had two or three female friends in their 50s that talk about becoming invisible. As they age, they discuss becoming invisible. And I thought that was a very strange notion, but an interesting one, that it's coming from multiple sources, that women are just, at least a couple of them, are tremendously afraid of, as they get older, becoming less and less relevant. And this would be the kind of thing that we're talking about in Japan. You don't want to become less relevant as you get older. You want to become, a source of wisdom for other people or something along those lines. The idea that you would be, because you get older and maybe less attractive, you would then be an object of scorn or pity, really says a lot about a culture if that's what's going on.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That as you get older and as women get older, especially here in America, there is that tendency for people to look at them less, if you will, and for them to feel more invisible. And I think that is a problem with the fact that, one, over sexualization in our culture, right? I mean, and the importance of beauty and things like that, is especially ever since it's been going on for a very long time, but especially with print media and then TV, and then now, of course, the internet, right? And all of the reality shows and all of the surgeries and all of the various things you can get, which is kind of ironic, actually, because, it was just earlier this week, Danielle had on one of these Real Housewives shows. And, I don't remember who it was, but one of my friends was with me. He's like, I just don't get it. Like, do some people think all of that plastic surgery, do rich people think that a bunch of plastic surgery looks good? Because I just objectively don't think that looks that good.
No, I know. I don't either, but I would have to assume that it's based on the tribe or group that you're hanging out with, right? It immediately makes me think of, like, there's indigenous tribes that have, tattooing practices, or what was it? The Aztecs used to actually slope the forehead. They'd like do these weird body modifications, and that's all got to be tribal beauty. And the idea that there would be a kind of tribal beauty that involves, disfiguring yourself in the name of beauty, like, I think that's pretty rich and prevalent. I don't know. Does that line up at
Yeah.
all?
Well, I don't know. It's a good question. And another one that came to mind is like, there's I don't know which country, but the neck elongation, and then in I believe it was China, where they actually would break the women's feet to keep them really small and fit them in really short small shoes, because that was seen as a sign of beauty. And then of course there's the opposite too. And I'm not that familiar with it, so this may be completely wrong, but in a lot of the Hawaiian and I forget the term for those kind of Southeast Asian, a bunch of Polynesia, that type of area, like
Mhm.
people are very large, right? And that's celebrated, and also even just historically speaking, especially like way back when, being large and having a lot of fat was seen as a great thing, because that meant you were well fed, right? When having
Yeah, yeah.
food was a sign of status, right? Whereas today is not as strong of a sign. But yeah, that how as we're talking about how women start to feel invisible as they get older. And in America, I think that is one, it is related to beauty, but another thought that I had was that it's related to power as well, and especially in
Mhm.
where historically speaking, such a man-driven country, where we're seeing that a little less, right? And you've seen more progress on that. Do you think that is related to it at all?
Yeah, there's some interesting things there as well. I think we're sort of shifting over from sort of ageism and kind of looking at these things about aging and now talking about it in terms of sort of power and beauty and how those are perpetuated. And there's something really interesting about that idea that as you age, as your beauty wanes, then you try to make up for it in an alternate way, either by maintaining beauty or becoming more beautiful, or as men, sometimes it's by becoming more wealthy and then exerting that influence in other ways. I remember reading a long time ago, and I'm going to probably get this wrong, but there was these kind of Vedic principles of age that are not something our society really hangs on to very well. But we do have kind of a framework for it that when you're younger, maybe you're hungry and you're curious and you're moving throughout the world, sort of consuming things and looking for yourself. You're trying to sort of find yourself. And then at some point, you end up in your early 20s, maybe finding yourself. And then you start kicking into this ambition phase, and this is sort of a phase where you're trying to test yourself against the limits of the world and just see what you're capable of. And this kind of goes for a while. And then eventually, when you get older, it starts to become about legacy, and it starts to become more and more about like what you can offer back to the community. So there's these ideas that as you age, your focus changes over time. And this being sort of from a different culture is not really something that we pay a whole lot of attention to, but it's probably happening nonetheless. That when you're younger, you're curious, you're out looking around, trying to figure yourself out, looking for the meaning of life or something. Midway through, you kind of go, you know what, forget the meaning of life. I'm just going to work and see what I can do in this space, and I'm going to become powerful or good within this space. And then eventually, sort of moving back into, I want to now engage with people around me. I want to engage with my community. And then I want to see eventually what I can give back to society. So I'm just sort of reiterating those points again. But it's interesting, if we thought of society more in those terms, we would probably realize that your power doesn't need to be that you're always beautiful, right? That's something
Yeah.
for the younger people to care about. When you get older, you should have a different set of concerns, and we could more naturally transition ourselves into those concerns.
Um, yeah, no, that is interesting. And real quick though, I wanted to poll our audience because we have them here. So we're talking about whether or not the it's harder to as a woman ages or harder as a man ages. So I want to pose that question to you guys over here. Do you think that it is? You can do it with your applause. Do you think it's harder for a woman to age, or do you think that it's harder for a man to age? Oh, we've got crickets over here. We have
Wait,
confirmed it
how
here
many
with our
people in
sample
your
size of there's one person over here. No, I'm just kidding. There's 4 or 5 people over here. So that is you heard it here first. This is a very official study. Lots of scientific things were done. But yeah,
double
one of the
blind?
other yeah, double blind. One of the things about getting old is your body disintegrating, if for lack of a better term, right? Stopping to work exactly how you want it and things like that. And one of the things that comes to mind with women, right, is menopause. Uh, what's your experience with menopause, writer?
Yeah. um, there years ago, and this is a little bit inappropriate, but I had a friend who just declared that all women that hit 50 go crazy. And this was his whole thing was like somewhere in the middle of hitting 50. And when we started talking about it, it was when both of our parents got divorced. And then we've seen other friends around us who go through divorces, and they kind of attribute it to empty nesting syndrome and a lot of other things. And then but there is a very real chance that it happens around the time of menopause as well. That this idea that the hormonal balance changes, all of a sudden people are more emotional, they have different thoughts, different processes, they're quite literally changing. And there's this searching that tends to happen because they're not content, they're not happy because of these changes that are going on. And so we've seen that happen a couple of times with just friends, and then once Sue Ann and I have sort of talked about this, we can kind of witness it happening at these certain time periods. And so there might be something to all that, or it might just be I don't know, just a horrible correlatory kind of thing that we're claiming causation out of something that doesn't exist at all. And it might actually be just like empty nesting syndrome, or it might just be that they finally got to look around and focus on something and they saw that their husband was an absolute jerk, but they didn't pay attention to it while they had kids in the house.
Or they tolerated it, or whatnot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen it with a few of the women in my life, and it's interesting how impactful it really is. And one of the common symptoms is hot flashes, and I swear, I think some of them almost catch fire a couple of times because we could be in the coldest room and they have on like 17 jackets. Or sorry, not jackets. They've got the fan and they've got like the ice water, and they're just like, oh, it's boiling in here. I'm like, man, I do not envy that at all. I don't know a lot of the stereotypical things that happen to men as they age besides erectile dysfunction. And if that's the worst thing that happens as a gender, that's not the worst thing, right?
No, no, it's not. There are it's interesting too that our society, men often attribute themselves to their identity is built through work. And when you age now in the workplace, then people tend to get fired or let go. And a lot of men don't know who they are without their job. So the difficult side of aging for men is not power, autonomy, or authority within the world and losing your self confidence because you lose your job. So I think is there that our society doesn't pay a lot of attention to. They're just sort of like, get over it. Yet, as we've talked about previously, the deaths of despair that happen to certain groups of men that commit suicide, either in slow ways or instant ways, a lot of that is due to job loss and loss of identity. And some of that comes with age as well. So I would just want to throw that out there to sort of balance the spectrum a little bit on that. Yes, it's not exactly a picnic for men either, but in a different regard.
Yes, no, I'm glad that you said that, and I want to get back to the loss of identity and the job and the association with that, and retirement as well. But before that, I want to make sure that I'm fair to our audience and making sure to ask you about both genders. So I asked you your experience with menopause. So now I got to ask, Ryder, what's your experience with erectile dysfunction? No comment,
It's
huh?
a daily struggle.
Ah. uh, let's talk about the loss of the job and identity and things like that, because and that is one of the things, right? Whether or not retirement is a thing and how that will change, and we can talk about that in a second. But you're right in the fact that, especially in these stereotypical roles, which both within America, but also within a lot of the major religions, right? Having the man as the the provider for the house, and he is the one who goes out and originally slayed the beast, but now he slays the keyboard, and he is bringing home the bacon, he's providing, and then after he's done working, and then he has nothing to do all day, and then there's some people who are like, I greatly look forward to that and I will have no problem, and there's other people who are like, I'm never retiring. Where on that spectrum do you fall?
Oh, I'm in the never retire category. Um, I, you know, a while back, I started trying to work out more. And the reason I was wanting to work out more is so that whenever I transition more into retirement, which I consider just spending more time building things, right? Maybe not spending as much time sitting at a keyboard, but I want to be strong enough to lift a sheet of plywood. I want to be, so a lot of my goals are based around these ideas of like, you don't want to mess up your back, so you better start working out now. It's some of that kind of stuff that is sort of thinking long term about where I want to be when I get to certain ages. And I'm thinking about physical capabilities, but yeah, the idea that I wouldn't be doing something is very, very bizarre to me. I have a hard time wrapping my head around it.
Yeah, well, props to you for doing that, because I think we've mentioned a couple times on this show, but not just with health, but in a lot of different ways, doing that preventative maintenance, and by working out and strengthening those muscles now while you're healthy and while you still can. One, that probably keeps you healthier longer, right? And it keeps you stronger longer, and as you age, it will enable you to do more of that. So let's talk about one other way that the body fails as you get older, and that's the brain, right? It gets harder to remember things. You can't process things like you used to be able to, And I've certainly seen that a lot. And, I've seen that some with, my lovely octogenarians over here. But I've also seen that in some people who are younger in their 50s and 60s. And some of them I've talked with about it, and they've said about how, oh, I used to be able to do this, or I used to be able to, when I was playing this game, I used to be able to think 5 steps ahead, and I used to be able to have a conversation at the same time, and now I've got to really focus and really think about it, and it's just not the same. And that is really tough because the body is, it's easy to, like, not easy, but it's easier to understand, like, oh, this is a mechanical thing, it's gonna wear down over time. Like, I get that, but my brain, that's the one thing that, until, besides age and time, like, nobody can take from you, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and at least we kind of assume that the brain can be something that can't be taken from us, right? That it's really the core of who we are. We really sort of align those two, and that sort of body mind connection is really important. But we tend to privilege the mind over the body in an interesting regard. We give it more credence, but we also give it less training. Like, we understand you need to train your body, but we don't often spend time training our mind. On a kind of example of that was my grandpa on my father's side. Uh, when the year he retired, he was roofing his mother's house because, of course, she was older, and so he's out roofing her house, slipped off the roof because of the frost on it, got caught on the ladder, and when the ladder flipped over, then he broke his neck.
Oh
So
no.
he went from yeah, he went from being super athletic guy that was running about 10 miles a day and going hunting all the time and doing all these things to being somebody who is confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life.
Oh man, what a
Um,
change.
yeah, so seeing how the shift between a focus on the body, I mean, he was already intelligent and very smart and driven and everything else, but he had to sort of, he had this whole life that was often built around the idea of retirement where he was going to go out and do all these active pursuits. And that got sort of taken from him instantly. And so instead, he started having to work more on his mind, and because it was one of his major tools to interact and engage through the world. So when it came to things like playing dominoes, he would win every competition. Whenever it came to things like he would do crossword puzzles, except for he would memorize the entire thing. And so I would walk over and sit next to him, and he would just be like, okay. And he would just start telling me things. And I would just start at the top and I would fill the whole thing out in one shot with him telling me all of the answers. So he would do
Dang.
crossword puzzles in his head, and when I would sort of see that it was one of the things he was doing intentionally. He couldn't really physically train anymore, but he was doing mental training all the time.
No, I think that's a really important concept. The fact that you need to be training your brain, just like you need to be training your body. And I mentioned, I think it was when we had Known on a couple of Wednesdays ago. We were talking about mental health, and I talked about the emotional fitness class that I took, right, which is one aspect of the brain, and that was they alluded to, and they were using that gym model, like, hey, you go work out your body, now you need to go work out your emotional side, right? And you brought up games a couple of times, and I've mentioned it as well. And I want to point out that not only are those just for fun or entertainment, right? But they are serving a purpose as well, and they are forcing you to think. They're forcing you to remember, and that's actually one thing that I've noticed that these lovely old people over here do a great job of. Every morning they get on and they play these games, and some of them are word games, some of them are memory games, some of them are like find the thing in the in the on the screen type of the games. And some people might look at that and be like, "Oh, they're just playing games," but no, they're keeping themselves, able-bodied, and they're being helping drive their memory better. And in that way, whenever I say, "Oh, nice to see you," she's not like, "Oh, hello, Tyler." She says, "Oh, hello, Reed," because she knows who I am, and she's able to remember those things.
That's what she's doing on the phone. She's using the face capture. She's letting
Yes,
her
yes,
phone recognize for it. These, you think they're games, but they're pretty wily. Um,
yes.
I've had friends in the past that kept notebooks where they would log every interaction they had during the day, and then read them over again to sort of help their brain reiterate what was going on. And as they got older, this became like a vital tool to help them sort of remember their time and their day as that the mental faculties started to slip away, which I thought to be really interesting to sort of take these proactive strategies.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're not improving, you're regressing. I think there's a better worded quote, but something like that, right? Where if you're not actively getting better, you're getting worse.
Hmm. Yeah, just like something about sharks and never stopping, and yeah, it's
Oh, that's good. So Ryder, you know, is there any significant changes that you can see for you in your life as as you get older? That either that you're looking forward to or that you recognize is going to happen and you're just going to have to deal with.
Oh, yeah, I think there is a level of, because a lot of the work that I do is in the design realm, then the design realm is constantly changing. So there's always this kind of need for upkeep and staying on top of trends and ideas. And so you could either consider that to be a positive or a negative within the workspace. What's sort of fascinating is that I can't see ever being able to sort of let my foot off the gas on certain ideas and certain ways of doing things. To sort of the one thing that would be really nice is to say, I'm just going to rely on this previous knowledge set that I have, and that will be able to carry me into the future. And the way our world works right now, I just can't see that working very well. So there is a fear that I have that as you get older and your mental faculties start slipping and people start championing younger and younger people, how are you going to remain relevant? How are you going to still have authority within the space if you're not just relying on your gray hair? Then what kind of skills do you need to have? And I don't see these as really fearful things, but they are things that have cropped into my head just in the last couple of years. It didn't exist there previously. These were not things I thought about, but in the last few years I have started thinking about it. Like, what does it look like to be a 60-year-old web designer? Like, is that
Yeah.
even possible now? Does anyone care about that person? Or would you instantly just go with the younger, hipper kid from the Ukraine?
No, that's a good question. Although I will point to certain jobs that tend to pull that much older person, and the one that pops in my head the most is the president of the United States. That typically, I guess it's like you got to be 75 plus. I don't even know how old our president now, but he's up there, right?
Yeah, he is, but that's also time bound because what was JFK was one of the youngest, right? And he was like 40 or something like this. And so, there's yeah, there is something about respecting the elder statesman, all these kind of things that kind of gets played. You don't want this young, impetuous person, but I think I'm sort of peaking out on those like prime years there. I'm not sure if that's going to work for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not going to say that I would vote for you if you were president, so you'll probably be all right.
Yeah, thanks, Reed.
But it's not too late to run. You are old enough, so that's all you need, right?
Yeah, all you need is just enough gray in the hair to make people think that you're wise, and apparently you just smile a lot, and shake babies and pat hands, or I don't something. Yeah, that's it.
Let the all the young people behind the scenes control you, right? That's how it works.
Yeah, yes. As soon as I get comfortable being somebody else's puppet or mouthpiece, this is going to be a great career option for me. If I could just remember all the lines that they keep telling me, that's the problem as I get older.
Well, as you get older, one of the requirements is you come around once a year to that special day, which is your birthday, and it's interesting to see how different people respond to that. Right? Some people really embrace it, and they like, oh, this is the one day that's all about me. Which ironically, the people who drive into that the most, a lot of times it's more about them than just that one day. But not always, right? And then there's other people who are like, I don't want anything to do with it, and some people because they don't like getting older, and some people just because they just don't care and they don't want the celebration and the circumstance and all that kind of stuff. Where on that spectrum do you fall? Do you like to celebrate? Do you like to just kind of let it idly slip by?
Oh, I think I'm more along the lines of letting it slip by. I don't mind celebrating it. I had a big 40th, which was great, but it's more along the lines of I just think it's another day. I'm so abstract about this stuff that it's not that I dislike it or like it. I'm just so ambivalent in that space. How about you, Reed? What do you end up doing?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of the spectrum. It's not like a huge deal if we don't do some sort of celebration or something, but I do like, in my mind, kind of like we had gave you a round of applause here earlier. Like any excuse you have to celebrate, I think is a good one, right? Because there's plenty of days where you have the every day in day out drudgery, kind of like we were talking about yesterday, and kind of like we were encouraging people to do that vacation mindset on the regular day. So yeah, so that's kind of how I look at it. It's like, hey, why not have some excuse to do a little something, even if it's something small and it's just you or just you and a significant other or whatnot. But yeah, if you're gonna have a big party every now and then, why not? I mean, what's the point of parties anyways, right?
Yeah, no, no, it's a good excuse. It's almost like a vacation again, to bring that back up, that you get this special day in which you get to sort of celebrate something that you have so little to do with, right? You have no say in when your birthday is or anything else about it. And really, it is funny that we have decided to celebrate something which is, I don't know, that just shows up anyway. It's not a reward, it's not necessarily an achievement, like, unless you consider living an extra year to be an achievement, but it does seem to be this like focal point where it's sort of like, yes, we will now focus on you. This is your day to be focused on. And there's something kind of lovely about that. What's fascinating to me is we've got friends who turn it into the week-long celebration, and then one friend that turns it basically into a month. And it's just kind of like, it's the one lovely thing is, a person that turns it into a really long thing, her celebration isn't look at me, look at me, look at me for the month. It's an excuse for her to go look at all of her friends.
Ah,
And
I like
so,
that a lot.
yeah, so instead of the reversal of it's my birthday, it's like everyone's like, "Oh boy, we're lucky it's her birthday right now because she's going to like cook for us and bring us food and hang out." And it's this kind of and I love that idea. I love the idea that you would use this chance to celebrate for yourself as a chance to like re-engage with friends.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna steal that. I like that, and we've jokingly said, "Oh, it's my birth week, my birth month," and dragging out that celebration. But the idea of using that time to celebrate, your friendships, your family, and things like that, that's a good thing. And we're doing that a little bit here today with our family. We've got our vacation crew over here, which is gonna give me another cue or another applause on this cue. I just got to abuse the live audience while we have it. And with that, let's unless there's one last thing I wanted to mention about birthdays is one thing that my mom always says is, oh, if it's my birthday, she says, well, it's my birthing day. And I'm like, you're right, it is a special day for you as well. So for those moms out there or dads, dads have to work really hard during pregnancy. You get to celebrate your birthing days as well. But let's take advantage of this live audience here and do something just a little bit crazy. And let's just have you guys yell out topics, and then we'll have Ryder pick one of the ones you guys yell out. It could be whatever under the sun. Just yell them out. Nothing's wrong. Literally any word that comes to mind.
Dogs.
Dogs. All right. What else?
Cats.
Cats. Oh, we got a cats and not cats. All right. We got dogs and not cats and cats. Which of those would you like to pull from, Ryder?
I would like to pull from the cats category.
The cats category. That's suiting because you have an upside down cat hanging behind you in a drawing form, or at least that's what it looks like from here.
Yes. Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, that's one of my wife's drawings, and we have a couple of cats. If I had to talk about anything with cats, it would be that I always was a dog person, and then I got married, and we had cats, and you know what? Cats are pretty cute, and I'm starting to
Cats are pretty
slowly come
cute,
around.
huh?
It's only taken 13 years.
It's funny because
Yeah, it just took
a lot of
13 years to finally sway me.
yeah, 13 years, huh? Well, it's funny because a lot of people who start to say they like cats are like, oh, I like this cat because it's kind of like a dog. It's like a dog but different. Where on the spectrum of cats do your cats fall? Because at least from what I've heard, I've never owned one myself, but you get the ones that are just extremely mean and territorial and that type of thing, and then you have ones that they come up to you and they rub up on your legs, and some of them even hop up in your lap and demand that you pet them, all those types of things. And then of course there's some cats that you just don't ever see. They're always hiding around the house or outside. Where on the cat spectrum do your cats fall?
Yeah, so we have two. We have Mochi and Ninja. They're both black cats.
Mochi and Ninja. Those sound
Ninja
like some
is one
Japanese
of the
inspired
Heidi
names.
cats. Yes, indeed. um, but yeah, the we have one that since we're talking about aging, it's been interesting that this was a very sort of regal, graceful animal that would hardly ever deign to be around humans. Just kind of would just kind of casually walk around in circles and had that sort of disdain for everything that is that really snobby cat trait. And then as that cat has gotten older and older, it has become such a lap cat. It now is just every time Suan sits down, it's instantly in Suan's lap. It's one of these things where that cat has sort of changed its personality over time. And then the ninja, that cat loves to hide. It's kind of a you would think ninja is in a warrior, but it's more like hiding all the time, kind of scared cat. But this cat is also a little bit like a dog. Like we always sort of joke around that we have one cat that's beautiful and one cat that's just like, well, really sweet, in the kind of bless your heart way. And Ninja's
That's actually
just
how
not
people
maybe the
described us,
brightest
Ryder.
cat out there. So, but that's why I love him.
Oh, that's nice.
What's that?
I said, oh, that's kind of how people describe us as well. That nice, beautiful combo with
Yeah,
that.
there's
Yeah.
one who's yeah, there's one of us who's really smart and the other one is just really nice.
Yes, really nice. That's why we keep them around. Well, I I've enjoyed the few cats that I have been around, but I still haven't decided how much I want one myself, and part of that's because, man, you got to do kitty litter work, and I don't know what else you have to do to take care of a cat.
Oh, I don't. Well, we had one cat when I first, Savannah and I were first getting together, that her older cat was trained to use the bathroom on the toilet. So there was no kitty litter. The cat would hop up onto the toilet seat, use the bathroom, and then Suan would flush it. But there are cat ways you can train the cats to actually flush the toilet when they're done. You use that sort of scraping instinct that they use to cover their poop, and you convert that into a pulling on the toilet handle instinct. And so that's a really fascinating little thing that smart cats can figure out.
That's impressive.
Go ahead. I
Norv, I
thought you were
gotta
going to say
ask you,
something.
does it make it? Do cats get more impressive if you know that you could train them to go to the bathroom on a toilet and flush it?
I don't think so.
That's funny.
You don't have to train her to go to the kitty litter.
I know, right? Well, you know what, Ryder? One of the other things about getting older is that you are losing time. And so for today, I thought we would have a nice little celebration and I would give you the gift of some time back. And so today we're going to end a little bit early. And so I'm going to go get my coffee. I'm going to go relax. I'm going to go turn off all my electronic devices and escape to the vacation.
That sounds lovely, Reed. You have a good time out there. And yeah, enjoy yourself because when you get back next week, we have to get back into the grind.
Back into the grind indeed. But I'm not going to let you or our viewers off that easily, or our live audience. The challenge for today is to go engage with someone who is older than you. And, in my case, I have the privilege of engaging with Ryder on a daily basis. So I've got some of that age checked off. But I also would
Thanks,
encourage
Reed.
people.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I would encourage people to go another generation higher and find someone who is old, over 65, right? And find someone who you can engage with and spend some time with and talk with and ask them about their lives, because guess what? At the very least, I bet they've got some pretty good stories. And at the most, or sorry, not at the most, but anyways, bad transition word there. But then they can tell you about how they walked uphill both ways through the snow, and they played with a hoop and a stick and all those fun things that they used to do back in 1941.
If you can do the hoop stick thing, Reed, that's what I want some video of next week.
Okay, we'll work on the hoop stick video. And with that, ladies, gentlemen, and Ryder, we will have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. Thank you.
Live
Thank
audience.
you.
Thank you. Thank
I don't
you.
know if you noticed, but there was force in here.
Bye, Ryder.